Good morning. Good morning, good morning, good morning. I am April Benitolo. I'm the CEO at Momentum, and I want to welcome you to Intentional Tuesdays. So this webinar series was designed to bring back some of the most popular sessions from our biennial conference and kind of do an encore performance for really anybody in the community who wants to register. The series is free. Thanks to our presenters who are more than willing to volunteer their time to come and do one more session of their topic from the conference. So it's my great pleasure to introduce you this morning to DeLynn Zell, who is the CEO and founder of Bridgeworth, a wealth management firm here in Birmingham and in Huntsville. So under her leadership, Bridgeworth has grown to 50 team members and more than 23 certified financial planners. DeLynn has done a fabulous job with this firm, has offered advice and managed retirement plans and wealth portfolios for hundreds and hundreds of customers. And she's also really active in the community. DeLynn serves on the board of trustees at Birmingham Southern College. She is on the St. Vincent's Board of Directors, the Greater Alabama Council of the Boy Scouts of America, the Oasis Advisory Board, and the Financial Planning Association of North America. So that is a handful, and I'm sure you have a really busy schedule these days, DeLynn, with this craziness that is going on in the stock market. So we really want to thank you for being here. We know that you are just a huge supporter of professional women. I think you probably have the most gender equitable wealth management firm in the state. You've got so many women on your team. I think maybe 40% of your folks are women, which is huge for this industry. So we thank you so much for making the time to be with us here this morning. We all know that wealth is power. So if you can teach us a little bit about how to hold on to what we've got and make more of it, we'd be so appreciative.
Great. We're looking forward to it. Well, I'm going to start this morning by sharing a story, and I'm going to share with you one of my very first clients who came to see me. And keep in mind, at this point in time, I was in my late 20s, having just gotten started in this industry. And this woman was named Irma, and she was living under a cloud of fear. She had been so traumatized by her past that she didn't seem to be able to just live. And she came in to see me because she had been given an early out retirement offer from South Central Bell. And at the time, I was impressed. She came in, she'd been contributing for 401k, her home was paid for, she had no consumer debt, she had a big emergency fund. She had funded her daughter's college, and she had a lot of money in the bank. And on the surface, she had really done everything right. Then I went on to learn that Irma had married right out of high school, as so many did in that era. She married her high school sweetheart, quickly had a baby, and then guess what? The husband left her without a college education, left her destitute in many respects. She went to work as a clerk for South Central Bell, and she quickly rose through the ranks. Irma was smart. She went back to school at night and wound up working in the legal department at the phone company. She said she knew that she had to take care of herself, her parents, and a brother who was disabled. After reviewing everything, we talked several meetings and told her she was doing a lot of great things, but she was doing a lot of things that weren't so great. And we tweaked those things and we talked about it. After one of our meetings, and this is a point I'll never forget, we were standing at the elevator and she said, DeLynn, you've shared a lot of numbers, spreadsheets, you've made me feel better about my situation, but I have one question. I said, what is that, Irma? She said, do I have enough money to buy a roast for Sunday dinner? Well, I, like you, might have laughed. I did laugh. And then I looked at her and realized she had these big brown eyes, and I realized she had tears in her eyes. And she said, DeLynn, she said, I've never bought a roast since my husband left. She said, I have saved every nickel, and that's how I've accumulated so much in my bank account. And she sat there and she cried. She said, I've never bought new clothes. I bought secondhand clothes. My daughter has never had new clothes. She said, all I knew is I didn't have a plan. I didn't have support. And all I knew is I had to save every dime that I could get my hands on. What I realized in that moment was while Irma had done a good job, she was living under a tremendous cloud of fear. That's not the way to live. So ladies, what I hope to do today is in the next few minutes, just share some ideas, some steps I think we should all take so none of us will ever find ourselves in a situation of living under a cloud of financial fear. We want you to live a life of financial fearlessness. All right, so I'm going to share my screen with you, I think. Make sure I'm doing this properly. And get started.
No, not yet. Oh, there it is.
Are we there?
Yes.
Are we there? All right, thank you. I am learning technology as we go. So April said something about a minute ago about power. We always say knowledge is power. And guess what, ladies? We're all going to need that knowledge, okay? And here's why. We've got 11.4 million widowed women in this country versus 3.4 million men. Now, we all know men die first. I just didn't know it was quite this bad. 40% of the women control our global wealth, and I will tell you that number is increasing. 9 out of 10 eventually control their family finances, and I have seen that through the past 30 years. I would tell you 68% don't feel knowledgeable to plan. So the first thing we've got to do is make a plan. Now, this is one of my favorite quotes. Zig Ziglar says, if you don't know where you're going, you might end up someplace else. And that's how we think about financial planning. So pardon me if I use an analogy that might be foreign to some younger ones in this audience, and that is, let's talk about a road map. If you were going to take a trip to California, you probably wouldn't just start out head west. What we would do is we'd look at a road map, we'd figure out the most efficient way to get there, and we would follow it. And that's the same thing you've got to do with your financial planning. You have to make a plan. Well, I'm going to tell you something. Everybody who walks in our door, the very first question they ask is, how much money do I need to retire? And I will always say, it depends on what you're going to spend. And it's really interesting. Everybody wants us to give them a number, but that number that we give them has to vary based on what their actions are. So I thought it might be fun just to give you a little quiz. And if I were doing this in person, I would be asking for a show of hands, and I'm not sure I can see everybody, so we'll go with this best we can. So I'm going to give you some facts. Let's take Jenny. Well, Jenny's 35 years old, making $75,000 a year. She's putting money into 401k, and she gets a match on the first 6%. And by the way, that's a very good 401k match these days. And her goal is she wants to retire at 68 with the same lifestyle. Now, can anybody tell me how much money she needs to retire? Does she need $750? Does she need $1.5 million, $3 million, or does she need $5 million? Anybody want to? Well, I think you're all muted. But the answer is she needs $3 million to retire. Now, I can tell you, I know this number is staggering, and it often is. When people do their number crunching and do their planning, many times they just put their head in the sand. It's like, that's way too much. There's no way I can do that. Because what they're sitting there thinking, they're faced with a lot of other priorities. You may have student loans to pay off. You may have getting ready to buy a house, start a family. You've got childcare expenses, and you got to start thinking about college. And guess what? Retirement savings is often the last thing on the list when you have all these competing priorities. So the question is, where and when do you start? Well, the answer I would tell you is you start right this minute. You start right now. It's easy to procrastinate, okay? And it's easy to say, hey, I think maybe I'll do this next year or the following year because I want to buy a car. I want to remodel my house. I want to do all these different things. But let's talk for a second about what procrastination looks like. So let's say you want to have $2 million at the age of 65. How much money do you need to put away? Well, if you start at age 25, you need to put $1,000 a month away. If you start at age 35, you need to put $2,000 a month away. If you wait till you're 45, you've got to put away $4,300 a month. Do you see the difference in what the impact of procrastination? So what I tell clients, I tell anybody who asks, I don't care how much you can put away, just start doing something now. So now that I've convinced you you need to do it, the question is, where do you start? And I'll tell you, I give different answers sometimes depending on the person and the situation. Generally, the first place you would start is an emergency fund. And ladies, if we've ever needed an emergency fund, now is the time we've needed it. Who would have thought the world would have shut down for a global pandemic? We've got 40 million people out of work. We have people that we see cannot make it 1 month without their paycheck. And this has been overwhelming and devastating for so many people in this country. And every time I hear the news stories, I go back and think, had they just taken those initial basic steps of putting together an emergency fund, maybe some of this wouldn't be so bad. Now, the next place I would tell you is your 401k. Now, I'm going to play with some numbers here, and I think this is pretty effective. If you put away $4,500 a year, and you're getting $4,500 matching, that's $9,000 a year going into your 401k. Where else can you get an immediate 100% return? There's no place else other than your 401k. So what I'm also going to tell you is do this young, do this early. You know what? I don't care if you have to have a roommate for the first few years out of school. If you have an opportunity to get matching funds like this, I would put everything on hold to give yourself a good start in this. And one strategy that I tell people is, let's say you could put away 3%. Great, do that the first year. And then maybe when you get a raise next year, add another percentage and another percentage. But at a minimum, always try to put in and get the maximum amount of matching that you possibly can. So, you know, in order to do that, people say, well, do I need a budget? Well, I'm going to tell you something. I hate a budget. I hate the word budget. I hate the word budget just like I hate the word diet, because to me that tells us something that we can't do. So the way we teach people to manage money is not by establishing a budget, but rather than using a concept called pay yourself first. I don't know how many of you have ever heard this term before, but let me describe it real briefly. If you're putting money in your 401k, it's coming out of your paycheck every month, right? You don't see it. It's coming off the top, and then you're spending what you have left over. That's called pay yourself first. I would tell you do the same thing in building your emergency fund. Go ahead and have however much you can put away drafted from your checking account to your savings account or money market account at the very beginning, whenever during the month, or let it come out of your paycheck, however you can do that, and just take it off the top. And I call that guilt-free spending. If we can go ahead and take care of our needs, savings needs, any others, if you want to put some extra money away for a car, whatever it may be, take it off the top. And then you don't have to worry about every nickel and dime that you're spending. And that's really the way Irma functioned. She didn't know how much she needed. She didn't have a set amount coming out. She just held on and hoarded every nickel. Other thing I'd like to share with you is consumer debt is one of the biggest obstacles we see in people, especially young people. And it's not just limited to young people. We see it all over. And I don't have a slide on this. I realized I accidentally deleted it this morning. But let me just kind of walk you through some numbers. I'm sure most of you have a credit card. I can't believe that we're still living in this day and age where we have many credit cards that have 20, 21% interest. It looks high, but I don't know if you've ever looked at the numbers to really realize how staggering it is. Let's assume that you have a $5,000 balance on a credit card and that you can only make the minimum payment. Did you know that at 21% interest, it would take you 12 years to pay off that credit card? So think about something you might buy and put on a credit card for $5,000. I've seen people put vacations, and then I see them get into the situation where they can't make more than minimum payment. That vacation has cost them $4,000 in interest, and they're still paying for it 12 years from now. So I would tell you to think very long and hard about consumer debt. Now, I would also tell you there's good debt. I like debt, if it's good debt. And the good debt I like for people to use is for mortgages, okay? It may be a mortgage, it may be a rental property that you are using, but borrowing money to buy something that appreciates in value versus depreciates in value makes a lot of sense, okay? So I'm going to show you something here, and let's talk about mortgages for a minute. I'm a big fan of 15-year mortgages, even 10-year mortgages, but a lot of people can't handle the monthly payment for that. So what we do, and I will tell you, this is what I did on my very first mortgage, is I took a 30-year mortgage, and we'll use this as an example. Let's say $250,000 mortgage for 30 years at 4% interest. Your principal and interest payment would be $1,193 a month. But what if we paid an extra $500 a month on that mortgage? We could pay that off in 18 years and have $73,000 of savings. And what if we were able to put a little bit more with it, $650? We could pay that off in 16 years and save $83,000 over the life of that mortgage. As far as I'm concerned, that's a great use of money. And the reason I say do a 30-year maybe versus a 15 is, what if something happens just like we're living through right now, where people lose their jobs or maybe furloughed for a period of time? It would be nice of that 30-year mortgage if you had the opportunity to back down on your payment, and then you can increase that payment when your cash flow returns to normal. So yes, it costs you a little bit more on a 30-year versus 15, but this is a good way to help you manage that cash flow. I would also say we see a lot of people getting ready to retire and help them through retirement. And for the past 30 years, I can tell you that my clients that have been the most successful in retirement are the ones who retire without debt, and specifically without a mortgage. You know, financial security is not always how much you've got coming in the door, it's how much you have to spend. And we can all adjust our lifestyles if we don't have a lot of things hanging over us and obligations such as debt. Okay, so my next tip is to not be afraid of the market, own stocks, and invest wisely. I would tell you this is the one thing Irma didn't do so well. Now, she saved her money, but she didn't invest her money because she was scared to take risks. Now, I know April alluded to a minute ago about the stock market being crazy, but here we are in a global pandemic where the market has just gone down over 30% in a very short period of time, and I'm sitting here telling you to invest in the stock market. Well, don't question my sanity, because it is the right thing to do. And the reason it's the right thing to do, I'm going to tell you, 72% of women lack the confidence in selecting investments. This was a NASDAQ study that was put out recently, and when they interviewed the couples, they said half the couples saw investing solely as the husband's responsibility, and 37% saw paying the bills as the wife's responsibility. You know, frankly, this is not very surprising to me. Well, I know things have improved, and April alluded to, you know, the women that we have in our industry, and I'm so proud that over the past 30 years, there's been a huge surge in women participating in financial services. Women are still skittish about investing and skittish about the market. We stereotype. Many of you may have gone to see Sally Krawcheck, which she was here in Birmingham last year. And she made a comment that I wrote down, and I'll never forget, and I think she was exactly right. Men talk to their daughters about savings and to their sons about investing. So if you'll think back to your parents, how many of you had parents who sat around the dinner table and talked about investing? They probably talked to you about saving. Now, I was fortunate. I grew up in a household where my father didn't have sons, and he liked investing, and he talked to us about the importance of investing. So it wasn't foreign to me. And when I went to college, I went here to Birmingham Southern, loved every moment of my time there. But my dad said, you can't get a business degree. You have to get something else where you can, at that time, a lot of business degrees were coming out. He said, I want you to have a degree that you can utilize and always have a job with, and that's accounting. So I said, okay, I'll take an accounting class. Well, half the accounting class were women. It was very common in the 80s for a lot of women to be entering the accounting field. But when I moved over and started going to my investing classes, guess what? There were only one or two females in the investing class. Ladies, what I'm going to tell you is that for you to be successful and live a life of financial fearlessness, you have got to embrace the concept of investing. Okay? Now, I know it's a kind of a scary time out there in the world. We are dealing with a lot of different things, and you're seeing headlines just like here on the screen. We've seen headlines recently talking about the crash. Is the boom over? Emergencies. Are we ready? Difficulties in the Middle East. But guess what? These were the same headlines that we have seen since 1970. History repeats itself, and especially so when we're talking about investing. Okay? Now, let me walk you through a few slides here. I've had to update some things with our crazy markets, and I'm not going to have time today to do a huge investment lesson, but I do want to show you a few things to make a point. In March of this year, the beginning of this year, the market was going fine, started off, a little bit of a dip, and then around middle of March, you see this red line, this purple line, I'm sorry. That is what happened to the market in a very, very short period of time, almost within a month. There was a almost 34% downturn in the market. Today, of course, this was as of actually the 26th, we have rebounded back up, and we are now just 6% down on the year. Remember the financial crisis of 08 and 09? People were scared, the markets were crashing, the economics, we were afraid of going into a depression. People pulled their money out of the stock market, and look what has happened to the market since the financial crisis of 08 and 09. Everybody gets fearful, and when people think about the stock market, what they hear is how much it goes down. There's not a lot of reporting every day. It doesn't make headlines anymore about great market days, but by golly, when the market's going down, that's going to be the headlines. But I want you to just look at something here. This is one of our favorite charts that we show clients. And you will see, while we've only had, let's count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 down years in the market since 1980. But these red dots reflect what has happened each year during those years. So let's look at one example here. At one point, the market was down 6%, and it rebounded up to 30% over the year. Okay? Look at here. We had a year back in the 90s that went down 20% at one point during the year and rebounded right back up and ended the year up positive 27. And if you look at what's happening this year, as I showed you on the slide a minute ago, during the year, we went down 34%, and today we're only down 6%. And we're certainly hoping we see this bar go up between now and the end of the year. My point is, you have to invest money. Okay, you have to be in the market, and you cannot pull out of the market. So let's even take a little bit further, longer look at the market. And this is a slide going back to 1950 through 2019. If you had been invested in all stocks, S&P 500, over that period of time, your $100,000 would have grown to $800,000. bonds would have grown to $300,000. And if you had had a 50-50 portfolio, it'd be $550,000. If you look at any one time period, as I'm showing you here on the far left, the market in any 1 year, as we have just seen in the past 30 days, can go down tremendously, but it can also go up tremendously. But if we spread this out over a longer period of time, looking at a 20-year rolling average, the stocks are going to always outperform the bonds and cash. The key is you've got to stay invested. Now, this is another slide looking at the past 20 years. U.S. stocks have averaged 7%. Inflation's been at 2%, and government bonds at 4%. But the average investor has only had a 3.4% return. And guess why that is? Because the average investor tries to use the stock market like gambling. You know, put the money in, the market goes down, call, oh my gosh, the market's going down, get me out. Market's gone up, put me back in. Well, that's not the way the market works. If you behave like average investors and try to do that, you're going to negate the great returns that market can give you over a long period of time. This is another one of my favorite slides, and put this in here today because of what we've just experienced. We tell our clients at the beginning, we're going to pick a portfolio, excuse me, losing my voice. We're going to pick a portfolio and we're going to invest and we're going to plan for the downturns ahead of time. But you have to stay with it. There is no one, I promise you, there's no one that can predict the stock market. You may hear people who do a great job of timing. God bless them. It's probably going to only happen once or twice, but no one can keep up a sustained period of outguessing the market. Now, let me show you something. This is staggering. Let's say you invested $100,000 in 1998 through 2018. It had a 7% return, $400,000. But what if you had pulled out of the market and missed the 10 best days? Your return would go down to 3.7. See, that ties right back to that previous slide I just showed you. The 10 best days in the market could take your return down from 7% to 3.7. If you miss the 20 best days, look what happens. And good grief, if you pull out and sit 2 months out of the market with the best days, you would have a negative return. Ladies, all I want to say as we finish up talking about investment is it's important for you to invest. And the reason it's important for you to invest is this number right here, inflation. Money in the bank is not going to be paying you very much. And this is where Irma, my client, made her biggest mistake. She knew she had to have a lot of money to take care of herself and her family. She did not understand investing. She did have matching stock in her 401k, but she put her 401k in the guaranteed interest. And the money she saved outside the 401k, she put it in the bank. And we know that over a period of time, that's not going to be helpful. For us to outpace inflation, you have to be invested in the market. Don't be afraid of the market. There are a lot of, in today's world, information is at our fingertips. And as I said earlier, knowledge is power. And a little bit of knowledge in the investing world can certainly go a long way. Now, my next to last tip, is talk about your estate documents and having those done. There are 3 documents that I want you to make sure you have. One is a will, one is a power of attorney, and one is a healthcare directive. Sounds pretty simple. A will, that is the document that controls your assets after you die. Many people say, oh, everything will go to my spouse. Well, you know what? That's not necessarily the case. If you die in Alabama without a will, that's okay. Alabama has already written a will for you. It's just that you may not like that will. Let's say you die and you leave behind a spouse and no children. Well, okay, everything goes to the spouse. That makes sense. But let's say you pass away and you don't have children, but you do have a spouse and you have a parent or both parents are still living. Get this, $100,000 goes to the spouse and then a half the rest goes, and my slide is left on for it, and half of the rest goes to the parents. That's not something I think most people would like. Let's say you leave behind a spouse and children, and I'm sorry, you leave out your current spouse, children, and the previous spouse. The first $50,000 goes to your current spouse, and one half of the balance goes to the children. That's not something you would want in a marriage with a second marriage. So it is imperative that you get these documents. Let's talk about a power of attorney for a second. A power of attorney ends at your death. A power of attorney is a document that can be used for somebody else to manage your business affairs in the event of your incapacity. When my father had terminal cancer, I had to run his business. And I remember using that power of attorney to go to the bank and to execute documents and to do everything that he would have done. And I can't imagine having been in that situation without that power of attorney. There are two types of power of attorney. One is called a springing power of attorney, which springs into action in the event of your incapacity. So a lot of people are fearful of giving their power of attorney to somebody else when they are, fully functional. Let's say you're in a car wreck and you can't take care of things. That's when that springing power of attorney would come into effect. And healthcare directive is really important. Obviously, that's the decisions that you don't want, that you want to make now, so that you don't have your loved ones sitting there trying to make some decisions for you at the end of life. I share personal stories because I think they're more impactful. My mother had a sudden brain bleed 3 years ago, and we were faced with a hard decision. Do we leave her and hope that she makes it through, at which time her lifestyle would not be what she would have wanted? She would have been basically a vegetable. Or did we make that hard decision to let her go? And as we sat there struggling, and lots of opinions are offered in times like that, I said, look, she's already made that decision for us. And we pulled out her healthcare directive. And I'm going to tell you something, making that decision made me feel so much better, having it in her handwriting, seeing her signature, what she said, this is what I want to have happen. So I encourage you to do that. Do it to make sure your loved ones don't have to make unfortunate decisions. And I'm going to share one other thing about a power of attorney. For those of you who have college-age children, when your child becomes age of majority, guess what? You don't have the right to make decisions. Earlier in the year, we got the call that most parents don't want to get, that your child is in the hospital. He's off at college and the child's in the hospital. Of course, I'm trying to talk to the doctor, trying to find out what's going on, and guess what? They won't share much information with me because I did not have his power of attorney. Shame on me. I knew that we needed to do that. My husband's a lawyer. I told him before David went to college, Lee, make sure we get a power of attorney for him. And I guess it's like many lawyers or cobblers. They say, what, the cobbler's children have no shoes? Sometimes that happens with the lawyers. Lawyers don't have their documents, and we did not have that. And I guarantee you, the moment he got home, and he was fine, it was really not a big deal, but when he got home and got well, that's the first thing I had him do was sign that power of attorney. Okay, so the last note here, and this may seem a little self-serving, but it's true, and that is to live a life of financial fearlessness. I want you to hire a financial planner. And if you think about it, a financial planner, you are just really outsourcing that no differently. I guarantee you, most of you on this call have outsourced maybe your lawn care, child care. We use app to buy groceries. We use personal shoppers to buy our clothes. We do online shopping. We are not shy about outsourcing so many things of our day to help us be more efficient. And I would tell you, hire a financial planner. No different than outsourcing anything else. When you get ready to hire a financial planner, though, there's some things I want you to look into. And the key, these are the top things that I think you should investigate before you hire somebody. Number one, make sure they're a certified financial planner. Certified financial planner is very akin to working with a CPA versus someone who does not have their CPA. You want to work with somebody who's had the educational background and experience. Secondly, You want to work with somebody who's a fiduciary. Fiduciary means that the person advising you is obligated to sit on the same side of the table with you. Their recommendations by law, think about this for a second, their recommendations by law have to be in your best interest. The fees need to be transparent. You need to ask them how they charge, and more importantly, how are they, what are the underlying fees in your portfolio? Because many times those fees are hidden, and fees can be a tremendous drag on portfolios over a long period of time. Most important, I would tell you though, is to find somebody who you trust. Make sure they meet all these other things, but make sure you find somebody that you can trust and relate to. If you're young, if you're in your 30s, maybe you're looking for a financial planner, work with somebody who may be close in your age. You know, if you are getting ready to retire, if you're looking for somebody to advise you through making some major financial decisions about retirement, make sure you're working with somebody who has a lot of experience in that area. And also ask for referrals. If anybody can't give you referrals, you might want to run the other way. Now, I do feel a little compelled to, as we wrap this up, to share a little bit more about my favorite client, Irma. She didn't retire that year. In fact, she went back to work, continued saving, continued investing, and about 3 years later, she came in for her update and review, and she confessed to me that after feeling financially secure, after going through the process, she bought herself a new car. I said, Irma, wonderful, let's go outside and see it. She said, oh, DeLynn, I bought a new car, but I didn't drive it. I'm like, what do you mean you didn't drive it? She said, I bought a Lexus convertible, and I'm scared to drive it. Well, of course, we had a good laugh. She became, over time, a little more comfortable driving her car. She started buying clothes at regular shops. She wasn't going to the secondhand store anymore. She was enjoying her money, splurging on her grandkids, and it has been a wonderful relationship to see somebody go through that for 30 years. Again, while she had done many of the right things, she did some things not so good, and some of those things that she could have done better might have helped her not living under this cloud of financial fear. So ladies, what I would tell you as we wrap this up is take the 5 simple steps that I've laid out here today. Become knowledgeable about your finances. Remember, knowledge is power. And then I promise you, just by doing these things, you will be well on your way to a life of financial freedom and a life of financial fearlessness. I'm going to stop there. Again, these the seven steps that I suggest that you use to make sure you're living that life of financial fearlessness. Now, I will turn it over. I know I've covered a lot of information in a very short period of time. Is there any questions or anything I can answer?
Well, thank you
at
so
this point?
much for your presentation. That's really useful information at a time like this. We'll start with our first question.
Okay.
They said someone attempted to reach out to her credit card company to decrease the interest rate to pay off her debt, but she was told she couldn't decrease it. So is this true, or should she be able to negotiate the rate?
Many companies do negotiate rate. I would tell you a lot of times it depends on the credit history and your credit score. If you can't negotiate the rate, you can certainly go try another credit card company. But it is true, many will negotiate if you tell them you're going to leave and go someplace else.
What are your thoughts about non-stock options or investments like VC funds or real estate?
Look, I'm a big fan of real estate. You know, I personally invest in real estate outside of, outside investments. You can have real estate and investments called REITs, but I do have outside real estate. It's just a diversifier. Okay, so when the stock market's down, it is kind of nice to know sometimes you've got something someplace else of value that can be sold at a later date. Over time, real estate is usually pretty good inflation hedge. But again, we've seen clients through the years, and I'm from South Alabama, grew up on a peanut farm, know a lot of people in my community growing up were very land rich. and cash and investment poor. And so while their real estate was worth a lot of money, they weren't very liquid. And when things happen, that sometimes was difficult to negotiate. But I would tell you to make sure if you're going to invest in real estate, you don't ignore the other side as well with liquid investments.
Should we include Social Security in our financial plan if we have 10 years before we can receive it?
Well, we certainly do. Look, there's a lot of conversation about Social Security. The age has been bumped up over time. But Social Security is a tremendous, is a large contributor for many people's retirement. I don't know what will happen. I'm certainly certainly not good with the political side of this, but I would have a hard time believing that the government will let the Social Security program go under. Now, that being said, we do have clients who ask us to run the numbers both ways. So sometimes we'll run the numbers and include Social Security, and other times we'll run the numbers and exclude Social Security just to show them the difference.
How does someone get started with investing in the stock market?
Yeah, that's a great question. Look, as I said earlier, there's a lot of information out there right now. All you have to do is pull up your browser, Google, and say, how do I invest money? There's some really good books. I should have prepared something to give you some recommendations of Allie. I can do that and send it to you and let you send it out to the participants for some great books to read. So the first thing I would do is read, become informed. I would tell you, it depends on how much you're investing. Vanguard, Fidelity, those are good places to get started, to go on their website. You can open an account very easily online. Fees are extremely low, and they'll even provide some guidance for you if needed.
Someone said, so they are 40 years old and their company now offers a Roth 401k instead of the traditional 401k. So should she start contributing to that instead of the traditional?
That's a great question. For a long time, our 401ks, obviously you contributed, you didn't get to, you got a deduction, and then when you pull the money out of the 401k, it's taxable. And that's something I should have mentioned earlier in my remarks. We work with a lot of retirees, and one of the biggest mistakes, as I mentioned, is retiring with debt. But the other one is we find ourselves, especially with two working spouses, they wind up and they have a lot of money in their 401k and they don't have a lot of money outside their 401k. Well, the idea at the time was that the time the 401ks were introduced, tax rates were really high. And the idea was that when they retired, they'd be in a lower tax bracket, so it wouldn't really be as painful to pay tax on that money. Well, the world's changed and our tax rates are, fairly low now. And so people don't sometimes see a big difference in their taxes in retirement. So, and if they have all their money in the 401k and they don't have anything outside, every time they need to go get money, whether it's to buy a car or home repair, they're dipping to that 401k and they've got to pay tax on it. So in some cases, if they need $10,000, they're going to have to pull out $16,000 just to pay the taxes. And that's painful and it hurts over time. So Roths are fantastic. If you can qualify for a Roth, I would encourage you to do so. I like the Roth. I like the fact that you can use it and it's not taxable when you pull it out. But I would tell you that recommendation, again, needs to go back and you need to talk to somebody and look at your taxes and try to decide which is most advantageous to you based on your current situation. Or it's important to make sure you're looking at it, not just your situation, but your combined situation with your spouse.
Okay. When should someone get a financial advisor? This person has often heard that you should have certain assets or an amount of money already saved or available before you work with an advisor.
Yeah, that's true. You do see a lot of people waiting to hire a financial advisor when they're probably 5 years, or maybe even 10 years away from retiring. And guess what? That's great, but sometimes that's a little late. I would tell you to get one, as you, or get some advice as you get started out in the real world. Now, to address your question, our firm does have minimums. Many firms do, but I would tell you a larger firm And this is something that we do, and I know some other firms around town have done or considering doing, is that we'll have a specialized program for clients who maybe don't meet our minimums, who want just some one time or once a year or what I call an online coach or just some advice to get started. And we'll let them sit down with one of our younger financial advisors, and the fees are reduced, and it's a whole separate program. But it's a way to get your foot in the door and get started.
Okay. What would be your advice for someone's saving strategy if they are disabled? Would you still recommend investing instead of keeping your money in the bank?
Look, you always need to have money in the bank. We talked about that a little bit earlier. Good grief. We see 40 million people out of work. This is something it happened so fast, no one could prepare. It's not going to be the last time something like this happens in our lifetime, I can assure you. So you're always going to need to have money in the bank. And when I say money in the bank, I mean money that's not subject to market fluctuations up and down. But as someone who's unfortunately disabled, I would tell you need to make sure you probably have a little bit more than the 3 to 6 months, especially if you're dealing with a lot of potentially medical expenses. But I really, other than that, don't see a whole lot of difference between your investing strategy.
Okay. And we just had one comment from someone. They said that they are a client of Bridgeworth and that y'all have some great book lists on your LinkedIn account that people can look at. And I'll be sure to send the resources
Thank you.
in an email to everyone that you send me. And then we have
great. Thank you.
We have one last question. Should you account for 401k as true cash in comparing job offers?
That's an interesting question. Over time, it adds up. If you have a job offer with somebody who has a 401k and somebody doesn't, again, if all other things are equal, you ought to take the one that has the 401k, and especially the one with matching. When I started in this business 30 years ago, people would come in and they would have a pension and they would have a 401k. And then now, there are not but maybe 2 of the larger companies in town who still have a pension plan. By and large, employers have pushed that responsibility over to the employees. You're responsible for taking care of that. You're responsible for your own retirement. So paying attention to the matching program is really important.
Okay. And this is actually the last question, but I think it's a good one. Someone said that if you were trying to pay off credit card debt, should you still aim for 3 to 6 months worth of savings before you pay off your debt?
Oh, trying to decide which one to put first is tough. I'm a chicken. I like to split things up. I might do things. I might pay off debt and then make sure I had money in the bank. But I would tell you, paying off debt, there's something called a snowball analysis that we do with our clients. And I don't know how many of you have heard of that before. But let's say, we've had people come in. That's amazing. They'll have 5, 6, 8, 10 different credit cards, car loans. And we can run an analysis. And let me just give you an example. Let's say you're paying $1,000 a month on all your credit cards. Well, let's say you pay off one that had a $100 payment. Well, don't reduce your outflow to $900. Take that $100 and apply it to the next payment. So you keep how much you have going out the door the same, but you're able to accelerate that payment. I know that without an analysis on my screen, that might not make a lot of sense. But just think about a snowball. You want to wrap up after you pay off a card, take that payment and put it on the next one, and then add more to that.
Well, thank you so much. That was a lot of great advice.
Thank you.
And with that, I'll turn it over to April. And if you could put up the slide for our next session.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
DeLynn, thank you so much. We got tons of comments in the chat of people who sent me a message privately saying how great these sessions are, and this was fantastic information. So I hope that
thank you.
Great deal of benefit.
Right.
I thought you did a wonderful job of giving us, some very basic, like if you do nothing else, do this. to
Right.
some good advice on some of the tough questions there at the end. So,
well, thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun. I'd rather be doing it in front of a lot of people versus this little camera, but but we do what we have to do right now, don't we?
We do. And I've had the pleasure of seeing you speak many times in person, and I know how wonderful you are. And I really look forward to a future Momentum event when we can all be in person and we can invite you
Absolutely.
back.
Thank you, April. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, so next week, next Tuesday at 10, another Intentional Tuesday, we will have CEO of Work Matters, Gail Lance, who's a great friend of Momentum. And she's going to share with us a lot about what some C-suite leaders are doing to navigate this new paradigm and this pandemic and the, crisis. All the headlines that DeLynn was telling us about on Time Magazine that make us think that the sky is falling. Well, I tend to be an optimist, and I believe the sky is not falling. We have great leadership in this community, and I have faith that they will be making some very sound decisions going forward. And she's going to share with us everything from advice on some of the decisions that those leaders are making, what we as individuals might anticipate coming out of the crisis, and also if we're planning on making maybe a career move, what's the best way to position yourself during this time. So I hope that you will all be able to join us, and we will see you next Tuesday. Allie's going to be sending out an email with more resources and more information on how you can take advantage of what we have to offer at Momentum and also support Momentum. And I'll take this last chance to remind you that we've got a lot of Upward participants on the webinar today. And Upward is our new early career program. And so we will be taking applications this summer through August 31st for that program. So if you or someone you know would benefit from a more rigorous schedule and would like to apply for that program, need to do so this summer. And we would appreciate you sharing that information with your network. Thanks everyone for coming, and we'll see you next Tuesday.